but please continue, because you got into the who question or the labels with the pioneer. Let's continue the how and the cultivator.
Yep, how and cultivator. So how are we actually going to do this better? How, if I do this, will it affect that? It's if you wanted to find a home for technology and the how-tos, cultivator is it. How do we do this better? How do we optimize this? How do we get from here to here? How do we it's you can almost hear it when people are saying, yeah, but how do we do that?
Yeah.
You could almost hear, cultivator every time. It's just, but there's also, I guess, how much does this cost? How do we do this more efficiently? How do we do it more effectively? How do we do it in a way that's more beautiful? Like all of those things. And then regulator, the last one, is when. So what we're talking about with that rhythm before, when this happens, then do that. When this happens, do that. When, and it's not always just a solid beat either. So one of the things I like to think about is, regulator, our heart is regulator, and it speeds up when blood needs to move faster, and it slows down when we're sleeping, and so on. So it's responsive. It's not it's not just a perfect beat. It's a responsive beat. So when extra blood is needed, then pump again. It's that kind of a feel. So
yeah. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, let's explore these questions then. So we'll start with Steward, and I'll leave it to you, Kylie, or Melanie. What's the first question that comes up when you think of where? So you mentioned, where are the resources? What's the first question, or what's the question that's burning for each of you at the moment when you think of where, where, fill in the blank? What comes up for me? Go ahead, Melanie. Go for it.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So what comes up for me, as I'm driving through Portland traffic, is where are we putting our attention?
Yes.
Feels like in this day and age, attention is one of the biggest currencies. Where does my attention go?
Great.
Because the energy will flow towards that. That's what comes up for me. It's a great question.
Great. All right. Well, then why don't we just all answer that? And what's the first thing that comes up for you? Where where's your where are you placing your attention? So yeah, let's answer that, each of us.
Yeah, I had a felt sense of, in the larger context of my life right now, as we're moving into the holidays, wanting to wrap things up, creating spaciousness to go to support my sister in Portland, who's going to have a surgery tomorrow. My attention was, and knowing that I would have this conversation in the car, my attention was for spaciousness and being able to be present to this as much as I can driving. And it took a whole bunch of steps to make that space. So there was an intentionality around it. And then, of course, there's the exigencies of having to drive in Portland traffic and stay attuned and awake to all that. But I could feel the context of how what's important to me had to be planned. I started 3 days ago and getting things in gear to be able to have the spaciousness for this moment. So where I put my attention was intentional, and here I am doing it. And it doesn't always go that way, for sure, but right now that feels important, and it's a great question.
Great. Kylie, same question. Where's your attention going, or where are you placing your attention?
Well, very first thing I just want to say, Melanie, I absolutely love that you brought attention into this. That is perfect. So where attention for me, I'm a little ADD probably. So this question of where my attention goes is always crucial. It's making sure that I'm not getting interrupted by things unexpectedly, because that will lose it every time. It's creating space for certain things, sort of as Melanie was referring to there. So for instance, I'm, as of Saturday, I'm pretty much offline until the 6th of January. So I can just write. And part of that will be about actually switching the internet off my computer. So switching off the Wi-Fi, closing down email, closing down anything that might actually, interfere with being able to concentrate. There's a lot as well for me of kind of going, okay, it's very easy for me to get wound up, for instance, if I see that, that phrase, someone's wrong on the internet. So to make sure that I don't get sidetracked by that, so it's for me, a lot of it is about, okay, I need to steward my own attention, my own energy, my own priorities. And to some extent that can mean, okay, I'm going to just step away from the keyboard right now. I'm going to step away from that particular irritant because there's not really anything I can do. This is not the right place. This is not the right where to be putting my attention. And I suppose also a continuous question that I have is like, where is my locus of control? Is whatever this is this something that is, within my sphere of something I can actually do something about? Or is it something that I can influence, like next step out? Or is it just something that I let go because it's not mine to do? It's not my thing. So yeah, attention is a big one for me too. I'm done.
Very good. Very good. Where my attention is at, I'm taking in your answer, Kylie. Thank you. Thank you for that. Because now coming into my moment at the moment where I'm at, my attention goes to power alignment. We just did a conference with school psychologists, and we were talking about bullying and suicide. And there was just a recent school shooting. And what's been taking up a lot of my attention is the recent shooting of the United Healthcare CEO as well too. So my attention goes to power alignment. How do we create environments where everybody is heard? And there is an alignment of what everybody brings to the table and what that their value is recognized. So that's where my attention is at the moment. And so I think that kind of leads into why. What's the why question now that's coming up here as someone who's comfortable in the curator with the curator duties. What's the next natural why question? We explored why are we doing this? Is there another emerging question that is why centric? So what's the next question? What comes up for me is why is there inequality? Why is there hierarchy? Why are there power struggles? So those are some of my questions that come up, and the questions for you might be different. So what are some of the why questions? I know.
I'm curious to actually maybe even follow, if you think it's crucial to the conversation, Michael, the question of why does my attention go where it goes? Because I think that leads to the root of why there is inequality. Like, got to get through Portland traffic, before rush hour. Like, and why is there rush hour? Why are there this many cars on the road with one person in them? Like, you can really start unpackaging that why. And especially, Kylie, I love that you brought the why question often goes to what the curator answer is what is not working properly, where the feedback loop offers the potential for new openings. not as something wrong, but something, a gift, you know? So I would take that, for example, saying, okay, I had to start several days ago to get out of the house, but all I had to do midday, so I wouldn't hit Portland traffic, which is on the level of Bangkok, which is epic. You don't ever want to be in that traffic. And why? You know, so having to organize literally a whole flow of events so that I can get from point A to point B, because things are not aligned for human systems to work in transport in this culture right now. And it's expensive. Gas prices here in Oregon now are, you know, really rocketing, and they're nothing compared to Europe. And why? So why is it so difficult? What are the forces that are making this separate cars and no public transport? And it comes back to the question that I think you just posed, Michael, and my attention goes here because I have to do it in order to survive, because the systems are not fair. They're based on extraction rather than mutual support and feedback loops that help us make things better. You know, the whole definition of regeneration to me is very simple. Something that's regenerative leaves it better than it's found it. And the only way to do that is you have to ask why. Why? Yeah. And what's sacred? And if it's not, why? So that's where I go with that.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, I've actually had an interesting remembering actually of a why, a huge why question for me that got sparked again because I felt a need to explain a sense that I've had, or discomfort actually, about the big push towards decentralization as if it is a destination. And the discomfort was sort of, it's come from, I've actually just started writing a piece actually. So I was reflecting on the first time I heard about decentralization or decentralizing things was, you know, probably about 23 years ago, something like that. I was working in a place that was a not-for-profit. It was my favorite job ever, basically. And I had this mentor, a guy who was, you know, retired. He'd been a senior manager at, you know, Australia's largest telco. And he was there volunteering and, you know, trying to get IT systems up to snuff, you know, because pretty much they didn't have anything. And we hit it off. And so we used to, you know, have coffees and chats and, you know, we'd talk about the world. And one of the things that must have happened was we probably got some edict from one of the head officers saying, no, now you have to do something like this. And in it was kind of this idea of, oh, they're centralizing stuff. And I was kind of like, oh, so would, you know, is it better if it's just out in the regions or out in the, you know, the aged care homes and whatnot that they were? Is it better if they do it? And he said, well, it's a bit hard to say really, because every time there is a new CEO comes in to an organization, he said they're either going to be centralizing everything, or if their predecessors centralized everything, they're going to be decentralizing everything. And it's just, it's like every time, every new CEO is going to be going one direction or the other, and it's going to be pretty much the direction that's opposite to the one that was going on before.
Yeah.
So, and I was kind of like, you mean sort of like a pendulum? It's like, exactly. So I ended up in this thing of like asking myself these questions, like, why does this happen? You know, is it just these CEOs trying to look like they're doing something? That doesn't seem very likely. Is it that they, you know, they just have a preference for that? And so they're just seeing just the pros of their thing and the cons of the other one? No, that doesn't feel quite right either. And where I ended up going, and has now ended up being in, I suppose, in chirotic flow as well, is no, they were responding to the problem of the conditions
Yep.
that were there at the time, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not a pendulum. It's like it's a cycle that kind of every time you fix something, it creates another problem, right? So,
Yeah.
and so it swings and roundabouts. And this has ended up coming up again because of the sort of feeling that I've got that there's so much push towards decentralization is the answer. And it's kind of like we need to do a lot of decentralizing right now for sure, because of where
Mhm.
we're at in the cycle. This is something that has to happen at Curator, right? In this
Yeah.
in the cycle. But it's not the answer.
Yeah.
There are a whole bunch of things that you can't actually do in a decentralized fashion because it doesn't suit. So anyway, so that's an example of one of those why, and then
Yeah.
finally getting to
Oh my God,
something.
Eileen, I just
Mhm.
love that you brought that up because I've
Mhm.
just had an epiphany. And that comes back to this. I've seen that same thing. You see that a lot in the military. I was in a very structured organization for 7 years, the U.S. Navy, and that was you would laugh about. But what I recognize right now with you saying it is that the underlying aspect of the system developing those structures in the first place is for an extractive purpose. It's not following a chirotic flow. It's following an extractive flow in order to get more work out of an individual, more time on the chart, more money in the shareholder's bank account, whatever. So that the rightful place of where, for example, large transport systems, you can't decentralize that and have an effective system. They have to be linked. But if it's not to extract, if it's actually to really get people from point A to point B with the most efficient way possible, the most beauty, and you can create in a non-extractive manner what that could look like. Oh my gosh, that could be incredible and best centralized because everyone's gone into it and agrees how that would be. We would all be like, yeah, I want to take that system, not sit here in my car in traffic. But the decentralized aspects that are best kept to individual health. When's the last time you walked into a doctor and said, I'm really feeling like this, and I'm wondering if this is a problem, and the doctor might say, oh no, or they're driven by insurance won't pay for that, so let's go this way instead. Like you can't get more importantly decentralized and non-extractive than in your own body, and yet most of us don't even have a clue where to begin with that. So it's fascinating, and yet you want a healthcare system that has centralized aspects, so not every small clinic has, expensive devices that could be a shared pool of resources. So that's the epiphany that just came in, is it's actually fundamental to the nature of an extractive system that you keep going back and forth hoping you're going to get an answer or solve the problems that one didn't solve, then you go to the other. But what if we actually could just keep moving the energy so the whole flow is in service to knowing whether it needs to be more centralized or more decentralized?
Yeah.
That's where my mind goes. That was awesome.
Yeah. What comes up for me to build on that and going to the what question now of the scout, what does decentralization make possible? And also, what limitations or what problems might decentralization, cause or bring up? So those are some of the what questions that come up for me as we build on this conversation. What are some of the what questions that come up for both of you?
Around this particular one.
Sure.
Yeah, so decentralization is going to increase diversity, right, and an ability to tailor. So it's going to head towards curators going to be finding that useful, scouts going to be finding that useful, pioneer is going to be finding it useful, and then it's not really useful anymore when you're starting to look at trying to do cultivating and regulating, because you're needing to bring information together in bulk so that you can actually figure out what patterns there are and what's the best kind of response and so on. So what does decentralization make possible? It makes like broad exploration and resilience and like a lot of complex interweaving becomes
Mhm.
possible when things are decentralized, but it doesn't allow for quick decisions in an emergency situation, for instance. It doesn't allow for efficiency. Like you wouldn't want to have, like decentralized heart, and like it makes sense to have one place regulating it, not to
Mhm.
have like a heart in each finger or whatever. It wouldn't be very useful.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I suppose that's some of the stuff that comes to mind.
Yeah, very good. Good. Melanie, I don't want to interrupt your concentration while driving, but are there any what questions that are emerging from, or even if you want to respond to some of the what questions that are emerging here, what does decentralization make possible? Or, what are some of the limits of decentralization? Is there anything that comes up for you in response?
Yeah, yeah, thanks. So my mind goes down this rabbit hole that my little epiphany here is still spinning around. And that is what does it take to actually get agreement and movement of human systems and human capital towards a more centralized approach or decentralized approach? And when you go from one to the other, and do you design systems to actually move back and forth? Like anything is possible. That's the
Mhm.
thing that I just see all the time. Is anything
Mhm.
is possible, and that's very much a scout question. Is what does it take if you decide that this is the impact we want to have? I want to transport system along this corridor of I-5 that is efficient and beautiful and easy to use. And what would it take? And people who are oriented towards that, you wouldn't need a very large group of people to already start to come up with what the pieces of that would be. There would be a decentralized aspect. You'd have to get to it. Individuals would have to be able to move along the corridors to get to the transport itself. And then there'd be the centralized aspect. Like it's fascinating to look at what does it take for us to come together, make agreements, build contracts, move into implementation, and then stop to reflect around how we do it. Is it working? Do we like this? Do we want to keep doing this? And so it's
Yeah.
the whole on within the larger picture. So it's that in and out of flexible understanding before you move into structure. And at the
Mhm.
very core of it, I think you hit on it, Michael. We talk about universal basic income, but really, what is what is the exchange? What is the value? What's the value that we're exchanging through that? What is the economy around it? And that's
Mhm.
the piece that's been so challenging in our current worldview because, of course, it extracts and sucks the life out of places and people and directed towards very few people. And we're about done with that.
Yeah.
So, if a steward who'd like to shake things up, I love these books. That's great.
Good. So we'll take that forward now. What are the who questions that are starting to emerge from this? One question that comes up for me is, who is championing spaces for diversity? Who is looking for diverse input? So I'll turn it back over to you two as well too. What are some of the questions that are emerging out of this? That kind of takes it into the pioneering space a little bit.
So, well, I'll go. Just so we're talking about UBI,
Mhm.
right? So, and I'm talking about who, in a broader sense of just identifying something, identifying opportunity, right?
Mhm.
So, what is a nice opportunity for actually moving towards UBI?
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, the example that I've just been working on is it's like most countries, and actually, I don't know what state the US is in, so forgive me if I'm just speaking like a privileged Australian here. But there's basically social welfare programs for people who are out of employment, and they have a whole stack of conditions hoops that you've got to jump through and information that you've got to provide before you can actually even get onto the welfare payment, right, for unemployment. And then you've got to, like prove how many jobs you've basically applied for in every period, right? So in order to stay on there, you have to sort of meet your mutual obligations or whatever it is that they say. Okay. Well, UBI, first thing, remove the conditions. Right? That's an opportunity. It's an easy thing to do. You could reduce the overhead of administering all those conditions dramatically, freeing up a whole bunch of money using the using the tax system that's already there. Like you've already got the pipelines basically set up for it. And it's kind of like, okay, there's a quick, low-hanging fruit, shiny opportunity, easy way to get the ball rolling, for instance. So that's a who question. That's identifying the opportunity and defining
very
it.
good. Very good. Yeah. What comes up for me is, who is entertaining removing those conditions? Yeah. So since we're moving into universal basic income, who is putting forth ideas about it? Who is putting forth who is having those conversations? Who is starting to that's what comes up for me is, who is starting to entertain the conversation and who is putting out ideas that is worth considering. So those are some of the who questions that are emerging for me. Also, who is willing to participate in it as well too, not just who is putting forth the invitations, but who is willing to entertain the invitations.
Melanie, do you have any who stuff?
What comes to mind to me is that as a stewarding organization, and I love that you always start with stewarding, highly make me feel special. In that orientation of actually looking at what's going on, as we look out, we find that those in our areas around living soil, transformational leaders are the ones that are committed to thriving in their community. And when we look out into the world for those people and begin to answer the questions of basically going around the wheel of what we can do to help, ask where the resources are, get that map, the actionable map, and then ask what does it take? How do we move towards the direction that you want to head as a community leader, as a group of people with a dedication to a purpose around thriving and being close to the land, and then begin to say, okay, if we have that actionable roadmap, who's out there? Where are the gaps? What do we need? That is such a beautiful, that's the role of the nurturer. That's what's largely been externalized from our current economy. Because ask any woman who has to stop working to take care of the children, or any man who's had to stop working to take care of the children. It's that nurturing role that when it's put in the driver's seat and now allowed to do what's best for the children, the seventh generation, with the least amount of effort and the most beautiful outcome, man, that just changes the entire conversation. So that for us helps to find the who, that's out there. The wrapped labels around things, start to see, okay, if we're going to do that, how do we move to the how? That's where I come back to. Does that answer the question? I have a bit of a divided attention, so hopefully I got there.
No, absolutely, and we're naturally working into the how questions. So and that's the thing. It can be related to directly in line with how this conversation is progressing. But what just comes up for you? What are the how questions? The big how question for me is how do we move through conflict? How do we better manage dissent? How do we how do we help the negotiation process along? Those are some of the how questions that come up for me.
Yeah, and I would say too I've known you in your role as a conflict mediator and negotiator. It's beautiful, and I think what I hear at the foundation of that too is how do you manage people's fear? What, ask them questions. What are you afraid of? Where's your attention going? Why is it going there? Because when you're fundamentally driven in your animal brain by the fear that you're going to lose something or be annihilated, which sounds ridiculous, but we function that way. If you can't address that at the most fundamental level, when you're in interpersonal relationships, it comes to those mismatched patterns that we apply from, I would say, my 6-year-old baby, or actually what I usually say is this 3-year-old driving the minivan. They get the keys to the minivan and they're driving, they can't even see over the dashboard. And that's not who you want to be driving when you're in a high conflict or tension situation. But we go there because the animal body was programmed to go there. So how can you create environments where it's safe to acknowledge that, not suppress it, acknowledge it, be seen for it, and be reassured, whatever that takes, different circumstances, to be safe, to know that someone's got your back, or you've learned to have your own back. Like, how do you create those circumstances? Very interesting. And on the larger, if you dial it up to the meta level, it comes back to economics. If somebody's ultimately, their win is your loss, which is what our current system is showing in spades as a contrast, that's not what we want. How do we do win-win? That's a really good one.
That's a big how question. Yeah. How do we create win-win scenarios? How do we make it easier? How do we make it easier for, how do we make it easier to move into win-win scenarios? How do we make it easier to move through the pain of loss? Because if someone is attached to an outcome or attached to losing something, how do we make it easier to let go or surrender? The big cultivator question. How do we do it? Yeah. So we're coming up here to the end of our time here. So let's just move into just some when questions so that we complete the cycle. But what are some of the when questions that come up for you? I'd like to say, when can we I'm sorry, my environment, a lot going on in my environment. When can we actualize some of the things that we're setting forth in motion? When can universal basic income be implemented? When or how long will it take for people to understand and to grok what is in motion? Those are some of the when questions that are coming up for me.
I want to make a little plug for Kylie again and the whole languaging around kairotic flow, if I might. And that is that the when is yesterday in almost every circumstance.
Yes.
What does that actually mean? Is by the, taking the time, and I love that you actually time bank this so that people are incentivized to be thinking along these lines. That if you really understand that everything, it's not just one big flow, it's small flows within flows.
Yes.
The right timing for the big changes is lots of small steps. That each small step starts to become patterns to lead to the larger step because you're pointed in the direction you want to be heading. And you keep looking at it. Do we still want to head in that direction? Is that the right direction? That kind of thing. So in honoring this aspect of kairotic flow, I think there's a huge power in asking those questions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Very powerful. And how can you start now to plant the seeds in fertile ground? And we started this conversation like, who are the people looking for you? Where is the spaciousness? And each of us have different levels in different areas. Where's the spaciousness where those seeking you find you? And what seeds can you plant to start moving together in the direction you want to head? And all of it's needed in diversity. It's all needed. That feels really, really rich. And it is yesterday. The best time to plant a tree you want to sit under is a long time ago, but the next best time is right now.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I'm going to bring my little bit of a scouty lens to when,
Please,
because I just have to.
please do.
So I'm bringing in Kairos, right? So, I can't stand up on a surfboard, but I still know how to do, like the bodyboards, for instance. And you have to get your when absolutely right in order to be able to catch the wave.
Mhm.
So there's that thing of it's like when it's not a deadline, it's not a, it's not a, it's not a wave that's already gone. It's a when can you? And sort of the being aware of when that is, and then what you can do to use the power as it's coming through. So I like to take a very chaotic view of when.
Yeah. Yeah,
Love
thank you.
that. Love
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. What comes up for me is when will the individual understand the entire cycle? When will, when will the individual account for the time that they've invested in watching this, learning chirotic flow, learning about the six conversations in infinity? So yeah, a lot of rich questions come up around when. All right, so we're gonna wrap this up. Before we do just a checkout, I would like to remind anyone watching this, because I'm going to be sharing this over the next couple of days. We're going to be wrapping up this series on Monday, Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with the Law of Inspired Action. And I'm going to highly recommend that this conversation that we had tonight is kind of very much the precursor to that one, because we're going to have invitations. We're going to have invitations to participate in living library, in time banking, to deepen our awareness of chirotic flow. And I'm going to be linking up Kylie's materials to this page as well too. So there's going to be some invitations that are going to be put forth when we wrap up this series on Monday with Law of Inspired Action. I believe Randy, Hayden, Nini Castle, and I will be handling that conversation. So I could be wrong, but yeah. So we have a couple more days before we get into that and wrap up this series. So as we check out tonight, Kylie and Melanie, I just want to check out with my usual question. What did you appreciate most about our conversation tonight? What did you appreciate most about our conversation this evening?
Well, I would riff off what Kylie just said, that in allowing emergence, and you held that container so beautifully, Michael, that what comes up, and we all clear about a direction we wanted to head in the conversation. There was a container and a context, but the emergence of what came up to direct and allow the flow of ideas and thought ends up really doing justice to the idea of right timing.
Yeah.
Like, it's about what wants to unfold in its rightful place is allowed to unfold, but you don't lose track, and you keep headed in the direction that you're going with a gentle, not a hard boundary, but a gentle clarity around the container, and magic happens. So much fun. I'm so grateful we're in these conversations all the time in my work, and I just love my days. They flow by because there's flow. It allows for flow. And that's where we're headed, I think, as individuals and as a collective. And I just wish everybody listening more ease in their own world in being able to have these kind of conversations and foster them and check in with themselves. How's it feel? Like, you get to the end of this conversation, and I say to myself, how do I feel? And the answer is, I feel great. This whole ride with Portland was fabulous, which it isn't always on the day. And yeah, I'm just very grateful. So that's what I would say. Appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciated having a clean framework to play in, Thank you for providing that, Mike. And of course, very grateful to both of you for being excellent play buddies. I kind of got this feeling sometimes it'd be lovely to actually get into a sand pit, with a bucket and spade and stuff like that, and see what we could actually create. Because I think we do. I think we do really well with this kind of thing, actually. Like they're just having just a little bit of a guide and then riffing from there. So I appreciated that it was doable and that we did it, and that was great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, what I really appreciate was the productivity. Because there was such a flow and there was such an ease to it, but I feel like this was just productive as well too. Just being able to go through the cycle like that and be in the questions, be in the emergence of it. And I really appreciate just how there's just and this is my interpretation of it. There was just no ego. I just really appreciate that there just seemed to be just no ego, and we were just really just kind of riding the waves with each other. And yeah, I think when I go over this conversation and listen to it again, there's just going to be so much more popping. It's like, ooh, okay. So I can go back to Kylie with this, and I can go back to Melanie with this, and I'm looking forward to Trey watching this conversation as well too, and just asking, ooh, what emerged there, what popped, and yeah, I just appreciate the flow and just appreciate the ease, just the ease of this. So thank you both.